What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we're talking about DeMar DeRozan being traded to the Chicago Bulls and the Bulls offseason as a whole. And it's a two-video day today. We're talking about Kemba going to the Knicks in a video later today as well. Be on the lookout for that. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials right here. Let's go and get started. Okay, DeMar DeRozan. We're going to talk about the trade first. Then we're going to talk about this a little bit for San Antonio. Then we'll circle back to the Bulls offseason and free agency and their new roster as a whole. So DeMar DeRozan to Chicago, 3 years, $85 million. In exchange for Thad Young, a first-round pick, and multiple seconds. So the trade first. The Bulls get a legit borderline all-star candidate in DeMar DeRozan that, yes, is a flawed player. I think everybody out there is aware of what DeMar DeRozan does not do well. He's not a three-point shooter. He is not necessarily a modern guard. And amongst a couple of other guards on the roster that are going to want the basketball in their hands at least some of the time in Lonzo and a lot of the time in Zach Lavine, his inability to space off the ball could potentially become a problem at a certain point. But with DeMar DeRozan with the ball in his hands, he's really improved as a playmaker in his years in San Antonio. And with him, Lavine, Lonzo, some of the guys they have in the front court, they're going to have a much improved offense going into next season because of DeMar DeRozan being there. He can really attack in a lot of spaces that a lot of players don't, and is just a really good addition for this team that needed a scoring punch and very clearly targeted going out and getting better guards for their roster based off bringing in three new ones, DeRozan, Lonzo, and Caruso. We'll talk about the entirety of their offseason here in a little bit. I'm interested to see what the first round pick is, what year it is, what the protections are on it. I haven't seen that information yet. If you guys have seen it and it's confirmed, you can leave it in the comment section. I'll take a look at it because remember, they already owe their 2023 first to Orlando. They gave them 21 and 23 in the Vucevic trade. Obviously 21 just got used, but 23 they already owe to Orlando, which means they couldn't have traded them 22 or 24. So unless it's a pick swap, but it was reported as a first round pick. So it's got to be either 25, 26, or 27, which ultimately probably isn't that big of a deal, but I'm interested to see what first round pick they did give up in the DeRozan trade. Like I said, not a perfect player by any means, but an exciting addition for this team. We'll get to that a little bit later. San Antonio. We did some good things here. I'm legitimately excited and proud of the San Antonio Spurs. It might not seem like a ton of value, an expiring contract in Thad Young, a couple of second-round picks, and we don't even know what the first-round pick is yet. But to get value out of DeMar DeRozan here is really critical because they waited all year long. They probably waited a year too late to try and shop him. They didn't trade him at the deadline. And then once we got into the offseason, it became kind of clear that there was a possibility he could go to like an LA team for nothing or just leave and get a big deal with New York or something like that. And ultimately, the way it worked out was a lot of the cap space dried up and DeMar DeRozan continued to look at his different options, ended up wanting to go to Chicago, still wanted to get his money. And the Spurs were happy to facilitate that and get a first-round pick in exchange. And I don't want to get too optimistic about it, but maybe this is a sign that San Antonio has decided to go in a bit of a younger direction, letting DeRozan go in the first place. They certainly could have explored re-signing him, continuing to run it back. But now with the amount of young players, especially guards they have on the roster, and now some extra draft capital as well, either there's a trade in the works or San Antonio is looking at worst case like a 1 year kind of hiccup here to get a really high draft pick and then go back into next year trying to compete again for the postseason. We'll continue to keep an eye on what's happening there in San Antonio as they're signing guys like Zach Collins. Okay, Bulls off season as a whole. In Lonzo, Caruso, DeRozan, out. Satoransky, Aminu, Young, a future first, 2 seconds. TBD, important section here. Lauri Markkanen and Coby White. Lauri Markkanen still a restricted free agent. Haven't really heard anything about him. Hopefully nothing breaks while I'm trying to record this video. And then Coby White, who is under contract. But I think the message to Coby White is pretty clear when you're Chicago and you bring in 3 guards in the same offseason and pay all of them a significant amount of money. When Coby White is sitting there wondering, hey, where's my spot in the rotation? Yeah, it might not exist, bud, because they've got 4 guards already now that are going to be playing ahead of you in the rotation in Lavine, Lonzo, Caruso, and DeRozan. Very interesting roster when you start to look at it. It's exciting, all the additions, but like I said, similar to the DeRozan thing, it's not perfect. There are flaws. Lonzo, Lavine, DeRozan. I'm assuming with the amount of money each of those guys are getting paid, they're all 3 going to start. That's just my assumption when I look at the roster. I don't think DeRozan or Lavine or either of them are going to be running the 1. Lonzo's the 1. So we run in 3 guard lineups out there. I mean, I guess you could technically count DeRozan as a 3, and I know positions don't really matter that much in the NBA, but defensively, that the lineup as a whole would be a bit of a concern, because when you look at it on paper, let's just assume Markkanen doesn't return, and we're looking at Lonzo, Lavine, DeRozan, Patrick Williams, and Nikola Vucevic. There's only 2 good defenders in that lineup. And, Lavine, DeRozan, Vucevic, those guys are not going to suddenly overnight become good defenders. That's a bit of a concern. Now, offensively, this is going to be really cool for Chicago, because it has been a team for years that has been Zach LaVine or nothing when it comes to efficient perimeter creation. It's been their only option. They've tried some Kobe White stuff. They tried a variety of different things. The only efficient perimeter playmaker they've had is Zach LaVine. But now they'll have multiple offensive focal points on the floor at the same time, and they'll never go without having a strong offensive focal point, which has increasingly been a huge part of really productive NBA offenses, is never just leaving your guys out to dry out there with a bench unit. At all times, you're going to have either Lonzo or Lavine or DeRozan or Vucevic or multiple of those guys all on the floor at the same time. And I kind of sneaky like the Caruso addition here as well, because he is exactly the kind of guard that you need outside of these guys, that's going to be able to shoot well off the ball, that's going to defend, that's going to bring energy. You don't have to count on Kobe White, who hasn't proven himself as a good rotation guard in the NBA yet. You don't have to count on him stepping up and leaving that as a possible hole in your rotation for a season in which they certainly are going to have some pretty high expectations. So I have concerns defensively, absolutely. I don't know how the starting lineup is going to look, but Patrick Williams' versatility defensively is going to be on full display. They're going to be able to go to him and say, continue to improve as an offensive player. We're going to need you to space the floor and shoot. But the other 4 guys are going to be really good offensive players, and we just need you to go out there and play your tail off and guard the best player on the floor. And that's a really fantastic role for Patrick Williams to continue to grow and develop into. The shooting stuff is going to be really important to watch, because ultimately it might not be feasible for him and DeMar DeRozan to be on the floor at the same time in starting units if neither of them are going to be able to space the floor. Typically, you're only really allowed one non-spacer in lineups in the NBA anymore, so maybe there is a Lauri Markkanen reunion here, but again, then you're going back to Lonzo being the only plus defender on the entire starting lineup. So some decisions to make here. Like I said, certainly not a perfect roster, but here's the bottom line for Chicago. For years and years and years, 4 and 5 years now at this point, this is a fan base that has not been able to get excited about anything other than an occasional offensive explosion from Zach LaVine. They made the trade for Vucevic in the middle of the year last year, and almost immediately they had some protocol issues. They missed the playoffs. They haven't been in the playoffs in years. They haven't been close to the playoffs in years. They've been going through this youth movement of rebuilding. And this offseason, they finally said, screw it. We're going to be good next year. The Lonzo addition is perfect for them. I think he's an awesome fit alongside LaVine, because LaVine is a very modern guard where he is a perimeter playmaker. He is a focal point of your offense, but he's not necessarily a point guard. Whereas Lonzo can play on the ball. He can play off it. He can shoot. He can defend. An ideal fit alongside pretty much any guard in the NBA, but especially a modern playmaking guard that doesn't really have a position in the backcourt like Zach LaVine. The DeRozan thing is exciting because it adds star power and legitimacy to a roster, and they didn't really feasibly have the ability to bring in someone like him in any other scenario, given their asset and their salary cap situation. And then to already have Vucevic there as well, that I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting is even on the roster amongst all of these other moves. It is, whether it works out or not, let's say that, the Bulls, they have like 150 win season over the next couple of years, and they're, the 4 or the 5 seed in the East. Think about where the teams in the East right now. Philly's TBD because of the Ben Simmons thing, but Milwaukee and Brooklyn are going to be good. Atlanta is going to be good. New York has gotten better. The East is suddenly really competitive. So there's no guarantee Chicago is going to be like a top 3 team in the East next year, but I give this front office all the props in the world for a couple of reasons. One, identifying when it was time to make their move and advocating to go and get guys that fit on the roster in Caruso and Lavine, and guys that can raise the floor of this group in DeMar DeRozan. But also, the logistics of bringing this all together are mind-blowing. Going into the offseason, Chicago had an ability to create around $20 million in salary cap space. And when you combine Caruso, Lonzo, and DeRozan together, those 3 guys have a projected combined first-year salary of $58 million. They made that happen out of $20 million in salary cap space. Granted, 2 of those signings, Lonzo and DeRozan, are sign-in trades, and then Caruso you bring in with cap space. So logistically, the order of operations of all those different things is going to be really, really critical. But I give them all the props in the world for making all that happen, for finding a way to bring in all three of those guys with what was, again, relatively limited cap space. And trust me, there is a video coming down the road about how the sign and trade mechanic and the increased use of it has completely changed the way that NBA free agency works. It's something I talked about a couple years ago when the Heat were able to bring in Jimmy Butler with no salary cap space. Trust me, that video is coming. So at the end of the day, I'm not fully convinced that this is going to be like the perfect season for Chicago. And honestly, I don't think their fans are either. I don't think there are a lot of Chicago fans that are looking at this roster and all of a sudden thinking, we run the East, right? Like, that's not how this works. DeRozan's not a perfect fit, but it's a fun team. It's going to be a team that's going to be able to score. They're always going to have offense on the floor, and they've still got some moves that they can make. I would be shocked if Kobe White is part of the long-term plan here. You don't bring in as many guards as they did in the offseason and think highly of the guards that were on the roster the year before that aren't named Zach Lavine. Just the bottom line. And then Markkanen, we're still waiting on his restricted free agency. Did they release the restricted free agency of him? He becomes unrestricted. Does he play on the qualifying offer? Do they sign and trade him somewhere? Do they package Markkanen and Kobe White together to go out and get a floor spacer at the 4? I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of those questions. What I do know is Bulls fans should be excited going into next season. As long as everybody stays healthy, they should be good. They're limited in terms of their draft capital because they already owe what is a 23 pick and then a TBD for the year pick to San Antonio as well. But I think this works out really well for everybody. DeRozan gets his money. He goes to a team where he has a clearly defined role as the veteran on what is still a relatively young team. And he goes to a team that's going to be good next year, and San Antonio gets some value out of a guy that could have left for absolutely nothing. Wins all around. Super, super excited to see what happens in Chicago this year. But that is going to be the end of today's video. Thank you guys very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. Be on the lookout for a Kemba Walker to New York video a little bit later today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, like I said, leave a like rating. And yeah, I'll catch you next time, fellas. Peace.